Hi, my name is Anna Lizotte. I am a sophomore at the University of Massachusetts Amherst in the United States. I am studying kinesiology at my university in hopes of becoming an athletic trainer once I am done with school. I am 20 years old and I grew up in central Massachusetts. I have been active my whole life, from playing soccer to being on a swim team, a track team, and rowing crew for my high school. Following my participation in these sports, I found a love for the gym, lifting especially. I believe it is incredibly important to treat your body right, regardless of if you are an athlete or not. And strength training and conditioning has always been very important to me and my family, and it's something I want to continue to broaden my knowledge on, which is why I thoroughly enjoyed this class. So for you, I have a portfolio of the work I have conducted this semester through mandatory and voluntary tasks. I have worked very efficiently in the class for the past 5 months, and I believe I have done a great job widening my knowledge on all things having to do with strength and conditioning, of course with the amazing help of Professor Florin. Mandatory Task 1 consisted of the elements of a strength and conditioning diagnosis, process, and goal settings for an athlete. We had to take into account the aims and goals, the planning, the execution, the control and assessment, and the feedback through a whole entire training process. We need to know enough about the activity or the sport that the athlete is participating in. We need to know about the athlete themselves, their gender, age, physical ability, height, weight, all of that, their injury, of course. And we need to know about the context and the environment to see how we can effectively help them become stronger, whether it's from an injury or whether it's towards a goal that they're striving towards, and so on. So for the aims and goals, we discussed short-term, medium-term, and long-term goals and how to effectively go about that. We also discuss different terms and such that you would normally discuss in the beginning of a course like this, so that we are familiar with the terms that apply to strength and conditioning and training an athlete in that sense. I think this task was very helpful because it is useful for, especially if you're wanting to be an athletic trainer or a coach of some sort. It's very useful for evaluating your athlete with all things considered: the environment, athlete schedule, strengths and weaknesses, and understanding how to go about guiding them to recovery or achieving their goals. In Mandatory Task 2, we discussed the contents of a training load, intensity, interactions, when they should do specific workouts, when they shouldn't, when it would be most beneficial and when it wouldn't be. We talked about general preparatory exercises, GPEs, specific preparatory exercises, specific development exercises, and competitive exercises. And we went through and with different sports like swimming, hockey, a marathon runner, cycling, soccer player, we took different training variables, whether it was the GPE, SPE, SCE, CE, and went through and talked about what that would mean for those specific sports, which was very helpful to us. We also talked about like heart rate, VO2 max, lactate in those individuals as well. And we looked at a weekly schedule and we were able to determine what days they should be training in what way. We also talked about skills, technical skills, physical ability, tactical skills, which is also very important for any sport that you would play. And this would be very useful for a coach, and it is good because the coach would be able to determine what days an athlete should do what for them to perform to the best of their ability while being fully recovered and not fatigued. In Mandatory Task 3, we broadened our knowledge on the application of principles in strength and conditioning in different contexts and environments, meaning whether it's a teenage swimmer who needs to improve their butterfly stroke or a middle-aged person who is overweight and needs to lose weight for the purpose of their health. We talked about different training principles on how to go about either of those circumstances plus more. We talked about agility for a basketball player, speed for a rugby player, flexibility for a soccer player, and so on. And we came up with proposals or training sessions for a week-long time period, and we came up with different ways to go about their training and just showing that there are multiple ways to go about something and there's no one right way to improve the way someone performs their sport. And this was very helpful because it shows us how there are different approaches that can be used to apply to an individual, and it's useful in making a training plan for a specified individual if you were a coach or even the athlete yourself and you were trying to help yourself. In Mandatory Task 4, we discussed strength training for different individuals, for different sports, different athletes. We discussed how you need to train muscles for throwing actions, push-up actions, jumping actions, and the muscles that are used in those. And we also discussed like what muscle contraction would be performed while performing those actions yourself. We discussed maximum strength opposed to endurance strength or power explosive strength and the differences between those, and how different athletes are different, or how different athletes use different muscle groups depending on the sport they play, like a long distance runner compared to a volleyball player, compared to a soccer player, and so on. And then there were some like math problems where you would see like you would take a 1 max rep and then you would determine like what that person's 80% would be, what that person's 90% would be, and so on, and where to use those principles in their training, because you don't always want to be training 100%. I think this is important for athletes and coaches, and it's useful for widening your knowledge on what strength exercises to perform for what sport, and like how intense you should be training and how heavy you should be lifting and what exercises you should be doing, whether it's barbell squats or lunges or like bicep curls, whatever it is for the sport that you are doing. In Mandatory Task 5, we discussed endurance training, and we discussed different tests that coaches can use to improve their athletes' endurance and how to track their progress in order to help them improve. Talked about lactic anaerobic power tests, which is useful for evaluating the speed of an athlete while recording their maximum speed, the distance they traveled, and the amount of time it took them to do so. We also discussed design and execution of exercises for developing their endurance, and we were to choose different objectives and then choose like a method, whether it's walking and stretching or like high intensity interval training, something like that, and a description of that method, and discuss how that would help an athlete to improve their endurance. And I think this is very helpful for improving your athlete's overall performance, using techniques to improve their aerobic capacity, lactate threshold, and their VO2 max. In Mandatory Task 6, we discussed flexibility training, which is often overlooked, I feel, by many people. I know for myself, I often come up with excuses not to stretch after a workout or before a workout, when in reality, flexibility is actually very important. We discussed several different methods that apply to flexibility and the goals that come with those methods, and then we were to come up with exercises to improve the flexibility in those arenas and where you would use that, like what environment you would use it, what age group would use it, whether it's children or adults or all age groups, elderly, whomever it may be. And I think that this is very important because it's useful for anyone who engages in physical activity. Flexibility is very important for everyone, seeing that it has a positive effect on the human body and the muscles that are engaged in all types of activities. It's useful for anyone going into strength and conditioning field and those who seek help to improve their own flexibility for their own good, because having a flexible muscle will allow it to grow more, which obviously everyone wants, and it improves your range of motion, which is very important. In voluntary task 1, we analyzed the application of principles of strength and conditioning in a real training environment. We were to split into 2 groups, and one was going with strength training and one was going with GAP, and I was in the GAP activity. It was like high intensity interval training. It really made us sweat, which I wasn't expecting, but it was really good, and the instructor was amazing. We were able to see what she did for a warm-up for the people that she was training. We were able to see the age group of the people who were in there and how she went about the course itself with training, and what intervals we did, what rest time she gave, which wasn't much, and the cool down that we did at the end. And we were able to evaluate it on our own and talk about our own experience, which was really cool. In voluntary task 2, we worked in groups of 4 on workload parameters and principles of strength and conditioning in different contexts and environments. My group specifically got developing the abilities for a 24-year-old basketball player at different stages of his post-injury, which was tearing his ACL. We created exercises after, I think it was like 12 weeks post-injury, 6 months post-injury, a year post-injury, something like that. But we had the class perform those exercises and do those drills, and we were able to participate in other people's projects, which was pretty cool. And it was very useful for a trainer or a coach who has an athlete who has torn an ACL or hurt themselves in some way, and how to get them back on the field or the court or whatever it may be. So this class overall was an amazing experience for me, and I know for my fellow peers as well. I feel like it really applies to what I want to do when I'm older, and I learned a lot on how to train an athlete properly and how to improve their endurance, or my own endurance even, my own strength, their strength, whatever it may be. I feel like I can take the things I learned and go with it wherever I go in the future. I had a lot of fun in the class, especially when we did hands-on activities, which was really cool. I wish that we had been there longer to do more of that, but things happen, so that's okay. But I feel like I have worked very hard in this class because I'm very interested in the material, and yeah, I put forth my best effort in this portfolio that I have created, and I believe that it is good quality, and it reflects how hard I worked in this course. And yeah, thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed.